Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. Now we come to Season 2, Episode 2 of Fawlty Towers, The Psychiatrist. And this is the longest episode at 36 minutes, 16 seconds. So I have a feeling that watching this one on TV, it'd be an hour with commercials, depending on where you place them. And it is a pretty fun episode. This is one that, going back for this rewatch, I'm like, trying to place, just based on the synopsis, what happens in it. Then as I'm watching, I'm like, oh, it's this episode. I remember having fun with this episode the first time I saw it. While I did have fun with it, I would be lying if I tried to argue the plot at its core isn't a little bit derivative of what we saw in Season 1 with the wedding party. But there is enough difference with what happens that it's, if not original, it's unique in its own right. And considering how Basil is as a character, you can imagine that stuff like this happens over and over again at the hotel. But it goes to the point of, why do people still keep frequenting Fawlty Towers? You would think they'd be out of business by this point. If not for how stuck up Basil is, just from the negative reputation of some of the other guests. But that's just me thinking of it like this. I'm trying to imply logic to an illogical situation, as some people would say. Well, the plot kicks off, or like an average day at the hotel. Basil has one guest there who he does not like. This is an episode where they minorly touch on his conservative viewpoint, but they don't, beat the audience over the head with it. And the way it plays off, I actually like it. And it's kind of a then modern way to compare and contrast, because Basil, through his dialogue, the way he dresses, the type of people he prefers there, we get his viewpoint. And the male who's staying at the hotel, he's walking around open shirt, got necklaces around his neck with different things, a tooth, some different symbols. Not quite a counterculture hippie, but he's in that mold. So you can definitely tell that Basil takes umbrage with this gentleman. And that is where most of the plot later on comes from. Because as the night goes on, Basil believes that this man has snuck a girl into his room, which technically he has, as we find out, in addition to his mother coming over to visit, which is the ending gag at the end, which is like, oh, Basil. But Basil is continuously trying to catch him, to the point where there's a scene later on where he gets a ladder. First he goes to the wrong room, but then he ends up getting the right one. Now as I'm watching this, I'm thinking, I don't know if it's a time period or the whole Britain versus US thing, but I don't think you can do that, Basil, even if their window's open and you are the landlord. And then the whole thing about him saying no guests after, blah, blah, blah. If that's in the policy of the hotel, if it's in this thing that he has to sign at the front, then yeah, I can see why Basil would be mad. The guy's there just breaking the policy, flaunting his whole thing, so I can understand why Basil would be wanting to catch this guy in it. Of course, it's one of those things that, like, hey, if you're breaking it, we can evict you, you realize that. And of course, while Basil was trying to catch this guy in it, we also have a couple other guests in the hotel. We got the titular psychiatrist. It's actually a couple doctors. And when I say that, I don't mean, it's just a couple of doctors. I literally mean it is a couple where both the husband and wife are doctors. Which we get a whole wordplay, word gag at that when they first check in, where Basil literally puts his foot in his mouth with dialogue, which is like, Basil. Kind of makes fun of his whole mindset, where he kind of feels, he doesn't come out and say it, but you could rightly see that he would, as a character, assume that it's the husband who is the doctor and not both of them. Or probably a little bit funnier if the wife was a doctor and the husband only had a master's or something else, or if she was a medical doctor and he had a doctorate in like English or something. But either way, it is a funny gag seeing Basil try to backtrack. As John Cleese put it in that stand-up special of his, the thing he loves about Basil is how he is like that to come up with excuses even though they're always bad. And a funny thing about this is one of the episodes he showed to highlight that, but it's a later scene with a different guest. And he, like we've seen time and again, Basil does try to suck up to the doctor characters until he finds out that the husband is a psychiatrist. At that point, while he's still cordial, well, in his backhanded way, he is a little paranoid as well, because he is of the mindset that psychiatrists only want to talk about one thing, And no, it's not blaming the mother. That is Marie Barone's whole thing about Psychiatrist, which we'll get to when I get to that episode later on. I believe that's season 5, season 6 territory. Nope, he believes all psychiatrists want to talk about is sex. Good, Basil. So how does that make you feel? I think you need to be eating some more oysters, yeah? I think he thinks that all psychiatrists are like Freud and they're always connecting it back to it. Which I'm sure there probably are some psychiatrists that do that. Because trust me, when I was younger I did have to go to one due to ADHD and all that. And I don't remember why they sent me to this guy, but one guy who I went to, he was trying to tell my grandma I was a pyromaniac. I'm like, do I look like and sound like Beavis going, yeah, fire, yeah, fire, fire? No, I do not know where he was coming from with that. That's why it's like, oh, right, not seeing him again. But then there are ones that are legitimately trying to help their patients. Now, we don't really see titular character here trying anything doctory because him and his wife are on holiday. Or, as we would say here in the U.S., on vacation. Either way you say it, they're not on duty. They might be making their own judgments based on what they see, but they're not going to come out and say something unless directly asked. But of course, you know, they're not there to just study Basil, even though he thinks they are. He's just paranoid. I guess he thinks that they're always on duty 24/7. They're on vacation. It's not like they're Inspector Gadget, Basil. Now with them, that's only 2/3 of the guests that Basil interacts with in this episode. In addition to those two, we have the gorgeous Australian supermodel guest that comes in, who, her check-in scene is one of the scenes that John Cleese showed in that one. And the thing about this is it shows another tendency that Basil has, and that is, not only will he suck up to upper-class guests, being a red-blooded male, even though he is in his 40s at this point, he is still a sucker for a beautiful woman. And just seeing the way that he is sucking up to her, it's like, Basil, Basil, Basil. You're thinking with the wrong... I'm just going to leave that there. He does take her up to the room himself, going to the point he was going to try to fix the light. And this is where the first misunderstanding gag with her comes in, because he's going to try to turn the light on to see that it's on. She happens to be stretching there, and he touches the wrong switch, as it were. Which is the part that still makes me laugh, and that's mainly because right when he's doing it, who should walk in to check on her but Sybil? And this is one of those things where he's trying to say, it was a misunderstanding! And of course, combined with everything else he's been doing throughout the episode, Sybil doesn't believe him. Now, the way John Cleese plays it off in the stand-up, it kind of makes it seem like he's trying to say that the next scene is him going in to apologize to her. But it's... now that I think about it, and I was thinking about it when I was watching this episode, I think what he meant was this is him apologizing to her for a later incident that happened. It's when he's still trying to catch the woman in that room, and he jumps out of a closet to grab her, thinking it's her, and he happens to have something on his hand, and he accidentally puts it on her shirt, right where he's touching before. So it makes him look like he did that intentionally to try to grope her, which of course just makes Sybil even more furious at him. Well, he does go to try to apologize to her, and that's where he ends up hiding in the closet. Sybil goes to talk with the guest, and then she notices his finger there, which leads to the whole thing, him trying to do an excuse. And if this combined with everything else eventually leads to Sybil saying, if you're going to grope the guest, be honest about it. Because Sybil does not believe Basil that there is a woman in the room with the hippie guy. We, the audience, know because we get the inside view. We get the omnipotent camera view. Basil knows she's in there, but no one else believes it. And of course, the whole gag at the end with the mother coming out of the room is like, really, Basil? That's who you were afraid of? His mother? I don't think we have to worry about his mother. I don't think he's Edifice. But with everything going on, you can see why she gets upset. I mean, the multiple situations of him inadvertently groping the Australian female, the whole ladder situation, combined with what Manuel tells her, because when Basil falls, Manuel goes to good help and he finds Sybil and he tells her the way he says it in his limited English is like, he tried to see girl in the room, he tried to see girl, she drive him crazy. Of course, as he says it that way, you can see what Sybil's thinking. And she rightly slaps him and kicks him out of the room for the night. Alright, a little post main body recording insert. There's one thing I forgot to mention because I forgot to put it in the notes after I noted it while watching the episode, and that is Sybil mentions her mother. One of the few times I believe she mentions her mother, and that she has a lot of fears, phobias. It's hard to get the right amount of space for her. This is a reference to John Cleese's own mother, who had the same issues, and the way Sybil describes her is not, if not word for word, is pretty dang close to how Cleese describes his mother's eccentricities, down to even it's hard to find the right amount of space for her. And I wonder what his mother must have thought when she saw this episode, if she saw this episode. I mean, I'm guessing she probably did. I mean, she couldn't get into Python that much, Cleese said, but she did love Fawlty Towers, so she probably saw that like, Johnny, was that a reference to me? Maybe, mother. I wonder if she took offense at it, or if she got the joke, or if it just went Nyoi. And rightly, this is a comedy of errors episode, but it is sprung from Basil being a busybody, trying to get in on everybody's business, even if with the one guy, depending on how the policies are, it might be justified. Him having to be a suck up to the doctors, him having to be a suck up to the beautiful guest, everything all going in the right direction, and Basil just, for another Shakespeare reference, he is an ass. But he's a well-meaning ass, if not prudish, at least in this episode. Now, one of the gags that they mentioned in this episode is a little bit of political humor, and it's a little bit self-aware British humor, I would say, but it's one of those things that you gotta know to laugh at yourself. And that is when the psychiatrists are checking in and they're asking about a pamphlet about what they can see in Torquay, the hippie guy gives them one he has. It's like one of the world's shortest books, like The Wit of Margaret Thatcher. He says a couple other things like Best British Lovers, but The Wit of Margaret Thatcher. That's pretty good. Shows that even back then, Cleese did not like Margaret Thatcher. He seems to be kind of sly on it, at least in his writing. I think the funniest thing he ever mentioned about it was in that one live performance of the parrot sketch where Michael Palin completely derailed the sketch by actually giving him the refund from the beginning. And of course, it was a good joke. Well, you can't say Thatcher hasn't changed some things. The funny thing about that is that this episode aired originally several months before Thatcher became Prime Minister. So it's a little topical. Probably making fun of more of her earlier political career, but hey, just there, you can still make fun of her. One funny little trivia from the beginning of the episode is this is the only time where the Fawlty Tower sign is turned around to spell out something else, that you actually see the person doing it in the act, which I thought, oh, that's a nice little opening gag, a little different for the second episode of this season. Another thing is the hippie guy, which it was in my notes his name, so sorry if I've gone through the whole thing and you'd be going, his name is Mr. Johnson. It was in my notes. Because his actor, Nicky Henson, he was actually very good friends with Cleese, which of course I think adds to their animosity, their negative chemistry, as I should say, their antagonistic chemistry. Because they're good friends, so they know just how to push each other's buttons and work with each other as actors to get the best performances out of each other, and you can definitely see it on screen. Sadly, Henson passed away last year in 2019 after a 20-year battle with cancer, which I'm assuming that's an off and on battle, because if it was straight battle with cancer for 20 years, like unless it's like one of those ones that just works slowly, like a blood cancer that works slowly, or one of those other ones that you can deal with but might eventually kill you. Like I know, I remember right, Monster, one of the podcasters I listen to, he has something wrong with him, which he's mentioned on the podcast, so I'm not giving away any information he wouldn't want out there. That's essentially what it is, but it's something he has to deal with medically. Like, take medication for. If it's something like that, like, oh yeah. But I think it's probably something that's going to be off and on. I didn't write down the full thing, but I'm going to guess it's one or the other. But either way, it sucks, but at least he's at peace now. I mean, I haven't really seen any other of his work. I mean, he did mention he was in Blitz, essentially the English Dirty Harry movie with the angry British guy. All in all, this is a fun episode. Like I said, comedy of errors. Basil just being himself, working off the gas, the situation makes it very fun, and definitely fits the term sitcom or situational comedy with how everything is derived, the plot, the comedy, the drama. Very fun second episode. This could have worked as a second season opener, but I think you start with something a little bit more subdued and then you go to the more outrageous one for the second one. Definitely of the second season episodes, this is one of my favorite ones. Because I remember laughing at the next few ones, but not as much as this one. Those ones are just some of the situations. Which, speaking of situations, the episode that follows this definitely seems inspired by the incident that inspired this entire series. And that, of course, is Waldorf salad.